Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching India Tonight with me, Sumita Karir. Our top story tonight, Delhi's killer air. Well, after reprimanding the government earlier this week and imposing emergency GRAP-IV measures, the Supreme Court today, in a hearing, now pulled up the Delhi government once again, highlighting the lapses in the implementation of GRAP-IV measures. The apex court has mandated measures now that include the banning of the entry of trucks in the Delhi NCR region. The bench highlighted how 100 of the 113 entry points are still unchecked, and that really is allowing an unchecked entry of trucks into the region. The court also has appointed lawyers as commissioners at such places to assess compliance. So the question is restricting the entry of trucks enough, and how long before we move beyond emergency measures like GRAP-IV? We'll go and discuss that with a guest tonight, but let's take a look at what my colleague Ishwarya has filed on the hearing that went on in the top court today.
Well, largely it's been that, in fact, air pollution levels have been deteriorating over and above 300 or 350 of AQI across the city as we speak as well. Now, despite that being fluctuating for a bit, now the Supreme Court, of course, has made sure that stricter norms are applied across the city as well. So this GRAP-IV or graded response action plan, which has been applied so that pollution can be controlled, apart from stubble burning and all the Diwali fanfare. The big contributor to the pollution, of course, was heavy vehicles which travel across the city. Those emissions also contribute heavily to the pollution of the city as well. So GRAP-IV in that sense is very important so that we can control the pollution inside of Delhi. Supreme Court has now said that the government should work on the entry of these heavy vehicles or trucks, and until next week, as you rightly mentioned, 113 points across the city have been identified within its limits, and trucks should not be allowed for a week going forward. And next week they will, of course, review. Even if the pollution levels do improve, they will still be reviewing these measures and take a call accordingly on the same.
All right, so how can India solve the pollution menace? To discuss that and more, I'm now joined by Vivek Chattopadhyay, the Principal Program Manager, Air Pollution Control Unit at the Center for Science and Environment. Thank you very much, Mr. Chattopadhyay, for joining us right here on ET Now. I want to begin by saying something like, we call ourselves the fastest growing economy. We are home to the third largest startup ecosystem in the world, and we are a bright spot in the global economy. But when it comes to the very basics like clean air, our pleas of hoping for clean air, they actually fall on deaf ears. And even for us journalists right here in the newsroom, it's the same cycle that repeats every year. There is Diwali, then there is the onset of winter, there is smog, there's air quality plummeting, the Supreme Court goes into emergency hearings, and then very conveniently, a couple of weeks later, the story is forgotten, but the pollution menace is not really dealt with. We are seeing the smog, the severe levels of smog, after Diwali right now, but the reality is that pollution is a perennial problem. It is an all-year-round problem. So why don't we have enough political will to solve this emergency?
Certainly, the political will and the coordinated efforts by central and state government lacks implementation. And also, there is a contradiction. While we are promoting heavy economic activities in this region, that is a welcome step, because even the economy has to grow. But at the same time, air pollution control cannot be ignored. This often shows in the winter because the meteorological and other phenomena doesn't allows pollution to dissipate. So that's the reason this season is a mirror of our effort being made throughout the year, whether they are working or not. And we are certainly not making that scale of efforts which is required in this region. India, particularly the Indo-Gangetic Plain, is the most difficult area for controlling air pollution because it's landlocked, and adverse meteorological conditions do not help. So our efforts have to be even 100 times tougher than the other regions, for example, China or Europe or US. But on the other hand, our measures are falling apart. I would say on some sectors there have been efforts being made, like tightening of the norms for new vehicles. But industrial sector, power sector, agriculture waste management, even municipal solid waste management, all those are lacking implementation in terms of technological solution, day-to-day solutions like sorting, recycling, processing. So we have to make
Right,
several efforts and we have to recognize it as a problem. Often what happens
right.
that government doesn't recognize the health
Absolutely,
consequences
Mr.
and the
Chattopadhyay, and
significance
we'll
of
come
the
to some
issue.
of those
Yeah.
solutions in great. Yes. So we'll come to some of those solutions that you've mentioned in greater detail a little later on the show. Now, ever since the Supreme Court implemented GRAP-IV measures, and of course it reprimanded the Delhi government earlier this week, saying that, why is GRAP-IV not implemented when, the air quality has become severe, it's gone beyond severe. And of course, if we see the air quality today, it is at 393 levels from 494 that was noticed on 18th November. But the question really is, how do you really see these orders, the implementation of GRAP-IV measures, the banning of the entry of trucks, and of course banning of, firecrackers in battling the pollution demon? And, with the kind of measures that the Supreme Court has suggested, what's the AQI that one can expect in the next few days?
The AQI is forecasted to improve a bit because the meteorological conditions are changing. But certainly, what is being said that climatic conditions are adverse because there is no western disturbance happening and there are no forecasts for the winter rains as of yet. And the wind speed is very slow, 6 to 8 kilometers per hour, very inefficient to dissipate the pollution. So the whole idea of graded response action plan is to avoid that situation because we are having the data available that what is going to be the situation in next 3 days or 4 days. 10-day forecast is even available.
Yes.
So when government knew beforehand, they should have implemented GRAP-IV earlier than the situation worsened. But the government didn't
Absolutely.
looked at their
Absolutely,
own
Mr.
forecast.
Chattopadhyay. And
Yeah,
that really is the point. Absolutely,
yeah.
Mr. Chattopadhyay, and that really is the point that the Supreme Court has mentioned, on 18th November, that why were GRAP-IV measures not really implemented? What was the government really waiting for? But when you mentioned that, of course, all of these measures in place, the AQI is expected to improve. But I want to understand from you, what's the range of AQI that one can expect with the implementation of these emergency measures? Remember, these are not all year-round measures, but just your, knee-jerk measures that the Supreme Court has put in place, or has asked the Delhi government to put in place?
It's a kind of like lockdown measures when it was taken during the COVID, but it is partial, I would say. Many industrial activities are still happening. Although the coal has been banned in the across NCR, but we have to check whether it is being implemented or not. The older vehicles like BS4 diesel and BS3 petrol cars and older cars have been banned, but the implementation, how to make sure that those vehicles are not flying. And what today court pointed out that there are 113 points, but are there checkpoints? Are we monitoring the vehicle entry? Because now it's technological era, so the vehicles are fitted with fast tags, so the vehicle information is there. So whether our gantries are designed in such a manner that we identify those vehicles, and certainly GRAP-IV has implementation has to happen in Delhi, but also in the NCR region. NCR region is a huge area where the implementation often lacks in terms of intensity. So coordinated efforts have to be taken, and the ground teams have to be there. Third party checks have to be there, although the court has sent out the court commissioners now. But even the citizens have to be involved in this process. And often, what happens, the citizens report the violations, but the actions are not being taken to control the emission. So I think there is a disconnect. What the citizens may not realize what kind of harm the air pollution is causing. So they can be eyes and ears of the government and their machinery, there are huge lot of awareness efforts have to be made. Although we have closed down the schools, but we have to realize that even
Right,
kids are
sir.
not safe in their homes. So it's a huge crisis.
Absolutely.
It's a economic crisis. It's a health crisis, and it's a a damaging
Absolutely.
effect. Damaging
Humanitarian
effect
crisis,
over the
if I may add
long
that,
term.
sir.
Yeah.
Yes, 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 sir. Sir, with this new directive of monitoring trucks that are entering Delhi NCR, how much do you think that's going to bring down the problem of emissions, which at this point in time is a larger concern? But do you really see the Supreme Court addressing that in its order or observations?
See, Supreme Court, because of the Supreme Court directives, the western and eastern peripheral expressways, which are the bypasses, being constructed, and they are supposed to divert all the truck traffic which are not do not have business in the city. So diversion is happening. The trucks are using those bypasses, but many trucks still use Delhi to cross the city. And when they enter during the night, when already the inversion layer is very low, the planetary boundary layer, what we say. At that point of time, if the truck traffic enters, all those are diesel driven, so their emissions will choke further the air quality, and we often see that the PM 2.5 levels peak during the night. So this is a directive that is for immediate emission control. So if it is followed in letter and spirit, then it may help to reduce the diesel pollution a lot. But we have to see whether that kind of data is available, that diversion is happening and non-distinct vehicles which are
Right,
not allowed, permitted, or do not have a business in the
right,
city
sir.
are not entering.
Right.
And even there is a directive that older
Right.
than 10
Right,
year
but
old
that's
trucks should
right, sir.
not
But that's
enter.
just one part of the solution, because there are several other
Several
sources
others.
of pollution as well: industrial emission, fossil fuel burning, indoor air pollution as well. Because when of course the top court puts these GRAP-IV measures in place, it's not right to assume that your indoor air will be cleaner. Of course, there's wildfire, transportation, and several other causes. So at this point, do you agree that what the government and perhaps the Supreme Court is targeting is just one part of the problem?
The job of the CAQM, Commission on Air Quality Management, which has the mandate now by the central government, that it has pollution control directives across 5 states and beyond that. So it's a huge area under them in order to control air pollution. And what directives of GRAP-IV are meant is for Delhi and immediate Delhi surrounding areas. But the CAQM has the authority to control air pollution across the region. The court's earlier directives for parali or stubble burning were not implemented. Even now, the new satellite data is showing that there is a difference between geostationary satellite data and what NASA satellite data is showing.
Right,
So
sir.
the farm fires actually numbers have
Right.
gone up,
Right.
which have not been recorded. So I think the
Right, sir.
implication of we have to use the data in order to control pollution at the larger region, definitely.
Absolutely.
Then only it
So
will
let
show
me
up
let
the.
me quickly ask you one final question. I'm sorry to interject at this point, but let me ask you one final question, sir, because we are completely out of time now. Beijing also had a similar crisis like this, but how did China manage that? How did China fix the pollution problem, and what lessons can India learn from that to ensure the development and clean air go parallelly?
China and even several countries made regional action plan very strong, very formulated, and with specific objectives and directions to the states, provinces. So they prepared three region action plan with a 5-year target. So this shifted all the shifted and polluting industries to clean industry. Diesel car ban is already there. Even they improved their public transportation system a lot with wider connectivity. Bullet trains and other things are already there. So I think huge efforts have been made there. Then only they see the result. But even more difficult area we are here because we are surrounded by Himalayas and other factors. So meteorological and
Absolutely.
geographical parameters are even
Right.
more unfavorable for Indian conditions. So we have to be much
Right.
tougher than even China and other European countries
Right.
or US per
Right.
se. In controlling air pollution, that has to
Hmm.
we have to realize, and the efforts has to
Absolutely,
begin
sir.
from the
Absolutely.
from the beginning, not during the winter, I would say.
Absolutely. Absolutely, sir. And we do hope that this doesn't really become a yearly affair wherein we have to sort of raise our voice, raise these concerns, and once again the Supreme Court hearing happens, and then there are emergency measures. There has to be a holistic solution to this problem of perennial air pollution in the country. On that note, thank you very much, sir, for joining us here and sharing your thoughts with us here on ET Now. And ladies and gentlemen, time for us to slip into a quick break, but lots more coming up on the other side. Don't go anywhere.